Good local.
So this next submission, councillors, follows straight on from the previous one. Submission 26.
There she was. Kia ora. Fantastic to see you here. One of my locals. Hey, 10 minutes, but you don't have to speak for 10 minutes. We like asking questions. We've read your submission, and we understand it. But we want to hear from you, and hopefully you want to hear from us. So.
Yes. Well, there are a couple of questions within my submission, so if you feel like jumping in, I don't really mind if you jump in and answer them or something like that. Oh, wow. Well, YROA YNOT is a youth governance group comprising of a variety of rangatahi from the Wairoa district, and as youth we strive for an opportunity to voice our opinion as well as give back to our community that we've grown up in. Well, at the moment we're making every effort to put more youth action and input with matters concerning our town. At the present time, our main concern and interest is around the YROA Waterfront Enhancement Project, which is a branch of the YROA's long-term plan. And the day after I put in this submission, YROA has their own separate submission thing going on, which we didn't know about. So I don't know, this is valid anyway. We were only notified about YROA having their separate meeting the day after the submission. There is obviously not enough variety, as it only seems like there's about 10 plants that are in the long-term plan, the Waterfront Enhancement Project, which are listed there: giant rush, kuta, pokaio, pure, harakeke, etc. It seems silly to just use these certain plants, as there are many alternative native highland and wetland plants that we could use that are uniquely made for New Zealand rivers. So why not take this opportunity to replenish some of Aotearoa's lost wetlands and water-dwelling plants, bring back animal life and bird life. To this day, 90% of New Zealand's wetlands have disappeared because of human activity, and how do we expect to lose that once we lose our last 10%? It seems strange because the wetlands play a very important role in our environment. Wetlands accept water during storms whenever water levels are high, which reduces floods, and when water levels are low, they slowly release water. Wetlands have an ability to recycle nutrients from eroded soil and improve water qualities. Unfortunately, majority of New Zealand's wetlands have been drained to make room for mammals like humans, agriculture and farming and stuff like that. If 90% are already gone, and then we are only functioning on a 10% capacity. These statistics do not show a healthy environment, and if we want to develop and maintain a clean and healthy living environment as stated in the Hawke's Bay Regional Council's values and vision of that Our Place newsletter thing, there's an obvious place to start with revitalising the wetland areas and plant life inhabitants of those areas. This should be reciprocated throughout the whole of Hawke's Bay, not just in Wairoa, even though this is what most of it's pertaining to, because that's where I come from. What else is there? There's many places like the Harakeke Walkway, which I walk through every morning on my way to school. Even though it's only a small area and there has been a lot of improvements there, there's still a lot of dead vegetation that hasn't been maintained or that, hasn't been looked after, and people just trample on it and no one really cares about it. I'm sure that there are many other areas of wetland and riverbanks that will thrive if we focused on regenerating the indigenous and native species that once occupied those areas. With wetlands come more life, meaning more trees, birds, marine creatures and insects with an overall healthier ecosystem. More than 30% of New Zealand's native birds are wetland birds, which is unique in itself to New Zealand. Many other countries have that. Although today, seeing these native species are rare, with already 15% of our native wetland species already extinct because of other introduced species or because we've removed their habitat to make room for humans. When people arrived to New Zealand like 800 years ago, the whole country was pretty much covered in forests with trees unique only to New Zealand. As currently proposed, the group of plant species soon to be introduced are a mixture of both natural, native and foreign exotic plants. We believe these plants introduced to Wairoa and pretty much all of Hawke's Bay should include a much higher percentage of native trees and plants with a much larger variety. We do understand the value of some introduced species for kai and to feed stock and all those other purposes, but there are many negatives of having foreign or exotic species introduced. Many introduced plants thrive in New Zealand conditions and become invasive. then they then have the potential to displace native plant ecosystems, and which lets them have the potential to become extinct. Many species of native plants have probably gone extinct from competing with invasive foreign plants like gorse, which is a hedge plant native to Britain, which is a lot of it around here anyway. These introduced species do not cater for our native insects, birds and animals, meaning they too have the potential to become extinct. New Zealand's native biodiversity is continuously under threat from new invaders, whether naturally, deliberately or unintentionally released. One example is Undaria, an unintentionally introduced seaweed native to Japan, which threatens to overtake native seaweeds and threaten seaweed communities that they support in our marine communities.
I have a question. Can I just stop you?
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. And I love what you've written here, and I love that you're presenting it so well, but can I just, otherwise we'll run out of time on our chairs from YROA, and they're very pedantic in YROA, and they'll stop us. What you're asking here is more say, isn't it? You want to have more say
Yes.
in what's happening in your region.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that man in the blue shirt, that's Mr. 80, he's in charge. So you've got to talk to him and tell him you want more say
Mm-hmm.
in this, because he's the one that's doing all this planning. Is that right?
Correct. But can we ask you some questions, Lara? Because
Yes, you can.
we've read your preso, it's fantastic.
So the first question is Paul, the queer your grandmother?
Yes.
We,
thought so.
we have her every year here, and pointing the finger at him. And when she's finished that, she points it at me.
Now we've got the rest of the family here.
Oh,
Come
that's
on.
great.
Hey, Lara, can I ask you a question? It was fantastic to see you guys at our public consultation, and you are the future of our district, town and the region, actually. Did you like the presentation we had for the bank, other than the fact that there's only 10 species there? We could do better. What else could we do there?
Well, it was mainly just we needed more variety, and like as I go on in the submission, it talks about how there's a list of variety that we could have, like manuka, that could attract the bees, like you said, that was what the plan was for.
Yeah.
And also, like not just Pahutakawa, there could be extra like kowhai trees or other native trees along our riverbanks to bring more colour and more life. And we also don't think it should be structured as in rows, like how it was within the waterfront project plan, because Wairoa is not a structured place. Wairoa is natural, not exotic, so we think that it should be all woven together. There was also a part in here where I mentioned about the ngahere, how ngahere means the bind, to bind together above and below the ground. And that's what we'd like to see within our town, not structured rows and, you know, all implemented because of a plan. It wants to happen how it wants to, naturally. And that's the main idea and concept that we want to go for. And there was also another thing I wanted to say was about how there was no, in the climate change section, climate change is a strategic issue, and there was no specific initiatives proposed for reducing carbon and regional emissions. I just wanted to know why that was, because we all know that that's a big environmental crisis, like internationally, the whole globe, you know, global warming is a big thing that's happening. So why is there not any things implemented in that area? And there's also a little picture which I've added in, which wasn't in my last submission, and I got it off the NASA's website about the evidence of how global warming is forming, and yeah, you can see the big change as it rises. For 650,000 years, atmospheric carbon dioxide has never been above this line, and that photo shows it shooting through the roof. So I thought I'd add that in, and yeah, those were the main things. We wanted to have more of an environmental focus, not an economic focus, for like tourism and all that, because we think those things will come naturally if we have a sustained, maintained environment around us. We won't need to worry about, like, you know, enhancing that area, because it will already come if we enhance our environment that's already here. We don't want it to let it to diminish. We don't want that to happen.
So can I just ask another quick question, then there'll be one over here. How can we get rangatahi more involved in what we do? How do we get the young people involved?
Well, probably Facebook is a good way, if we something like more incentives as well, and activity-based things to get us more involved, because I know that a lot of people my age aren't really into writing and speaking kind of thing, so more activity-based things to help us educate us. And yeah,
Done very well. We're really pleased to see you here. Councillor Bevan.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Lara, really appreciate the fact that you've taken the time and trouble to A, make a submission, and B, come and talk to us. It's good. Wetlands. I wish you were right about the 10%, because my memory of documents that have come before us suggest it's actually 2% that's left. So it's a huge problem, because it's such an integral part of our ecosystem. How difficult, in your area, is it going to be to re-establish or restore wetlands? I mean, can you see ways it can be done?
Well, yeah, definitely. I think the whole community will actually want to chip in if there was a project implemented for us to come along and volunteer our hands to, you know, rejuvenate these wetlands and bring it back to life. I reckon that our whole community will be for that, especially governance crews like YROA, YNOT, who I'm speaking on behalf of. We'd be all for that, and we bring our friends along to events like that. So that'd be a really good thing to see, like a project start, so we could get involved. Because our whole town would probably be for that. Like places like Whakakī that are letting like fall apart, and Iwitia, they've got wetlands that we can't, because we don't have the resources or the financial backup, you know. We would be there for volunteer hands though, but yeah.
Well, we've got 5,000 plants that are going to be planted around Ohoia Lake in 3 weeks' time. We're looking for volunteers.
Where's Uhuia Lake?
Just over the hill from Wairua.
Between Wire and Whakakī.
Oh yes, oh cool.
And Whakakī are planting also, and they've planted something about 500,000 plants in the last 20 years.
Anyway, there is some stuff happening. Lara, thank you very much for coming,
10 minutes go so fast.
making the, well, it's only 10 minutes, unfortunately. Yeah, tell my auntie that I was good today, and that would be good. Thank you very much, and for your presentation, and Mike is always there in the background if you want to ask. Yeah, good.
I used my email. Okay,
Oh,
well,
I'm not
thank
sure
you
he-
for your time.
Should have said
And I
that.
hope you just read this new submission because a lot of new content has been
We-
added.
We read everything. Yeah, thank you, Lara. Thank you. Okay, now, speaking of Mike's relations, Des is not here. And Toro, to be fair, is a little, yeah, let's hand that out, yeah. So the final proposals here, Northland and Wellington have both been dropped, but Hawke's Bay's, they've pushed the button on amalgamation, and it's now a live discussion. My understanding is Northland and Wellington, their proposals have been shelved through lack of interest or lack
Well,
of
they're going back, it appears, just reading that, they're going back to reconsult.
reconsult. Okay, okay.
Not on Northland, that's.
Hmm?
Anyway, well, we don't need to read that now. Surely
No,
we could
just tiny. but
put
yes,
your
I
put
have
your
that.
thing back up on the board and perhaps carry on with that. Yes.
We've just had a number of proposals here that have specific funding requests that have not made it onto the sheet. I'm wondering why
Did
the federal air is only $85,000 for a package of things, $250,000 for something else. We just had two groups come in and propose significant funding for biodiversity. A dollar amount, a specific dollar amount has been requested. Why are these numbers not included?
Oh, so in the column where it had NA, when this was first drawn up, the information was not perhaps immediately to hand, and some of them have been clarified through the verbal submission process, but I agree that there are others, such as the Tai Whenua one that Mare just did, which did have numbers listed in there, and they should have been on the list, but they are in the office, they are addressed in the officer's response. So we can certainly change that. We were going to do another update of this at the conclusion of today's hearing of submissions in any event, to make sure that the information on here was all, the information that had been presented was all captured before you make the decision.
You can't turn that, the landscape, can you? I can't read that.
Oh, I was just gonna zoom it in, if that's all right. I'll just go to. So that's me up to really.
So the Barber submission, are you happy to talk to that? Chief Executive, just what, need to go back and, what was he actually asking for?
No,
This is-
Mr. Barber. Right near the front. Yeah, his concern really in relation to funding was perhaps a slightly more generic one, in that he expressed his concern that we had said we had there was no mention in the plan of any increased funding to develop Māori relationships, and he talked about the the officer's response that was done around potentially looking at some additional internal resource to be able to do that, and that covers a number of the other submissions, and he did support that. So whether or not you would like to continue to treat this as a separate funding request, or make a decision on this as part of your overall decision around allocation of resources for tangata whenua engagement, it's really up to you.
Yeah, so Maro made an interesting request, but if we acceded to that request, the problem I've got is that it becomes precedent setting, and there's about, God only knows how many other hapu and marae that would put their hand up and say, well, you've supported them to help them with their science, to help them with their understanding of this, that and the other, you've got to do it for us as well. So it strikes me as the only way that we can deal with this is to have our resource here that can serve all of them, rather than give all each their own resource, because we simply can't fund that.
And that has always been the challenge for the regional council, having over 80 marae within our Hawke's Bay Rohi. You know, there is a potential for that, and I accept that for specific events such as Matatini, we may want to, make exceptions or consider on a case on its own merits. But as an overall allocation of resource for us, we're better to have it located internally.
Can I just ask, we still do have some submissions to come on this. Can we park
that
all
one.
of those
Iwi
particular
one. Yeah.
iwi relationship ones and deal with them as a whole, so we can get it more coordinated?
Great idea. So perhaps we could, so we'll park that one. We obviously parked the David George tourism one at this stage, do we? Yes, because there is potentially some more tourism related discussions to come.
But they only relate to Hawke's Bay tourism, don't they?
They do, but there could be verbal contributions in favour, potentially, from one or two others, even this afternoon. Chamber, for example. I don't know. I actually think. Jenny is here. Are you comfortable to present to us now? There is a gap, unless you know where Des is. That's fine. We'll carry on.
One of the decision points, if we put aside for 1 minute the support of the Art Deco Trust for the tourism funding, they did specifically ask for regional council support around public transport infrastructure over the time of the Art Deco weekend. So that is effectively a separate request that could be dealt with now. I know it's not directly a funding
I suggest
request.
you just refer it to the Transport Committee.
I'd like to speak to him.
The
Can I ask questions
Sure.
about it? Part of it was particular routes, new routes, and part of it was increasing on routes.
Yes.
Am I hearing there, Councillor Dick, that there are solutions that the Transport Committee can come up to that, or is it considering how we would subsidise such things? There was a suggestion also user pays, so.
My understanding was that it was they were not necessarily seeking a subsidy, but perhaps looking for someone with the expertise to manage a the arrangements with the bus providers and or, you know, either through an increased, possibly both ways, an increased frequency on, let's say, Route 12 between Napier and Hastings or somewhere else, but also potentially taking them at different hours, like outside of the normal hours of service as well, so that people, you know, if there's they're talking about having the vintage car events over in Hastings, if that was on in the evening, then people could, you know, news that they could get back. So
rather than do charter buses, is there room, am I hearing through this and through our transport manager, that there is a chance of us using our bus contract to be able to deliver